Jim Miller was born in Van Buren, Arkansas. When he was 1 year old, his family relocated to Franklin, Texas, where he spent his childhood. His father, Jacob Miller, born in Pennsylvania in 1801, was a stonemason who contributed to the construction of the first Capitol building in Austin. His mother, Cynthia Basham, came from a local Texas family. Shortly after the move, Jacob passed away, prompting Cynthia to move with her children to Event, Texas, to live with her parents. In 1869, when Miller was 8 years old, tragedy struck when his grandparents were found murdered in their home. Although Miller was arrested in connection with the crime, he was never prosecuted. Afterward, Miller's sister Georgia and her husband John Thomas Coop took him in and raised him on their farm near Plum Creek, close to Gatesville, Texas. According to the 1880 census, Miller was 19 years old and living in Coryell County with his siblings and widowed mother. On July 30th, 1884, he fatally shot his brother-in-law with whom he had been quarreling as the man slept on his porch. Arrested and convicted of the murder, Miller received a life sentence, but the conviction was later overturned on a technicality. Following his release, Miller found work as a ranch hand on the McCulloch County property of Emanuel Mannon Clemens, a cousin of the infamous outlaw John Wesley Hardin. Clemens was killed on March 29, 1887, by Bollinger City Marshal Joe Townsend. Soon after, Townsend was ambushed by an assailant armed with a shotgun, which would later become associated with Miller's notorious style. Townsend survived, but lost his arm to amputation due to the injuries. Over the following years, Miller traveled the Texas-Mexico border region and briefly operated a saloon in San Saba County. In Reeves County, he served as a deputy sheriff and later became the town marshal of Pecos. During this time, Miller developed a reputation for killing Mexicans, often justifying his actions by claiming they were trying to escape. Miller married Sally Clements, the daughter of Mannon Clements, in 1891. Sally was also related to the infamous outlaw John Wesley Hardin. Presenting himself as a devout Methodist, Miller earned the nickname Deacon Jim. His polite demeanor and active participation in church activities made him well liked by the townspeople. Known for his distinctive appearance, he always wore a long, black frock coat, regardless of the weather. Miller became embroiled in a bitter feud with Pecos Sheriff George A. Fraser. While Fraser was away in El Paso, he received reports that Miller had allowed criminals to gain more control over Pecos. Fraser returned with the help of Texas Ranger John R. Hughes and quickly jailed Miller on a murder charge, though a jury later acquitted him. Fraser also suspected Miller of a mule theft, leading to another arrest. On April 12, 1894, Fraser confronted Miller in Pecos over the murder of cattleman Con Gibson. Fraser shot Miller in the right arm before Miller could reach for his shotgun. As Miller tried to fire with his left hand, he accidentally struck a bystander, Joe Kranz. Fraser fired again, hitting Miller in the groin and ultimately emptying his revolver into Miller's chest. However, when Miller was taken to a doctor, his long frock coat was removed, revealing a steel plate worn underneath as a makeshift bulletproof vest, which had saved his life. On December 26, 1894, Fraser attacked Miller again, this time outside a blacksmith shop. He shot Miller in the arm and leg and attempted to finish him off with a shot to the chest, but once more the steel plate protected Miller. Demoralized, Fraser retreated. Miller then had Fraser charged with attempted murder, but the trial in El Paso ended in a hung jury. Fraser later lost his re-election bid as sheriff and moved to Eddy, New Mexico. However, he returned to Pecos to visit his mother and sister in 1896. Learning of Fraser's return, Miller tracked him down. On September 13, 1896, Miller entered a saloon in Toyah, Texas, and shot Fraser at a gambling table with a shotgun, removing much of his head. When Fraser's sister confronted Miller, he threatened to kill her as well. Miller was acquitted of the murder. After the trial, Miller began muttering threats against Joe Earp, a witness who testified against him. 3 weeks later, Earp was killed by a shotgun blast. To secure an alibi, Miller reportedly rode 100 miles on horseback the night of the murder. Around the same time, the district attorney who prosecuted Miller, Judge Stanley, died of food poisoning in Memphis, Texas. Despite his ongoing legal troubles, Miller joined the Texas Rangers and served as a resident ranger in Memphis, Texas, before transferring to Hall County. During his tenure, he killed a man in Collingsworth County while on duty. In 1900, Miller moved his family to Fort Worth, Texas. His wife, Sally, opened a boarding house with the help of their older children. Around this time, Miller began advertising his services as a professional killer, charging $150 per job. That year, he killed 2 men near Midland and was arrested for one of the murders. However, his accomplice, Lawrence Angel, was persuaded to take responsibility for the killing. Miller testified that Angel acted in self-defense, securing his release. In the summer of 1902, Miller claimed to have caught 3 men stealing cattle in Ward County. He killed 2 of them with his Winchester rifle and wounded the 3rd, who managed to escape on horseback. Later that year, on August 28th, Miller killed lawyer James Jarrett, who had represented farmers raising fences to protect their land near Lubbock. Local ranchers who opposed the fences for interfering with cattle grazing paid Miller $500 to eliminate Jarrett. Miller ambushed him while Jarrett was watering his horses, shooting him 4 times and remarking, "He was the hardest damn man to kill I ever tackled." In 1904, Miller accepted a contract to kill Frank Foer. On March 10th, he followed Foer to the Westbrook Hotel. Despite Foer being accompanied by 3 lawmen, D. Harkey, Jinx Clark, and Tom Coggins, Miller managed to shoot Foer in an upstairs restroom. After the shooting, Miller attempted to surrender to Harkey, who refused to take part. Clark and Coggins later claimed that Miller acted in self-defense. Foer succumbed to his injuries on March 13th. On August 1st, 1906, Miller killed Ben C. Collins, a Bureau of Indian Affairs lawman in Indian Territory. The murder was reportedly carried out on behalf of Port Pruitt, who sought revenge after Collins shot and crippled him in 1903 during an arrest attempt. A prior assassin hired by Pruitt had taken a $200 advance, warned Collins of the plot, and fled the area. Miller completed the job by shooting Collins with buckshot in front of his home, where Collins' wife witnessed the attack. Collins returned fire, but was ultimately killed. Miller was arrested for the crime, but avoided conviction and was eventually released. Miller was hired by local ranchers Jesse West and Joe Allen, through a middleman, Barry B. Burrell, to kill Allen Augustus Bobbitt, a cattle rancher and former deputy U.S. Marshal from Ada, Oklahoma. The motive for the murder was reportedly either to seize Bobbitt's land or to settle a personal grudge. The agreed fee for the killing was $1,700. On February 27, 1909, Miller set up an ambush near Bobbitt's ranch house. Concealing himself, he waited for Bobbitt and his hired hand, Bob Ferguson, who were returning from town in supply wagons. As the wagons approached, Miller fired both barrels of his shotgun into Bobbitt's side. Bobbitt fell from the lead wagon, mortally wounded, while Miller fled the scene, passing by Ferguson on his way to Fort Worth. Bobbitt's wife rushed out to aid her husband, who before succumbing to his injuries, identified Miller as his attacker. The crime was also witnessed by Oscar Peeler, a 19-year-old cowhand who had been paid $50 to guide Miller to the ambush location. Miller was arrested in Texas by a Texas Ranger and extradited to Oklahoma to face trial alongside West, Allen, and Burrell. Ada residents were well aware that the evidence against the 4 suspects, Miller, West, Allen, and Burrell, was not particularly strong, raising concerns that they might be acquitted. This unease was fueled by the recent acquittal of a man named Stevenson, who had been suspected of murdering Town Marshal Rudolph Cathy in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma on November 3, 1907. Frustrated by the possibility of another failure of justice, some townspeople decided to take matters into their own hands. In the early hours of April 19, 1909, a lynch mob stormed the jail. Reports of the size of the mob vary, with the Daily Ardmorite claiming it numbered around 200 people, while the Associated Press estimated it at 30 to 40 individuals. Between 2 and 3 a.m., they overpowered the guards and dragged the 4 men to an abandoned livery stable behind the jail. Miller reportedly remained calm and stoic, in contrast to the other 3 suspects, who begged for their lives. He made 2 final requests, that his diamond ring be given to his wife, and that he be allowed to wear his black hat during the hanging. Both requests were granted, but his request to be hanged in his black frock coat was denied. With remarkable composure, Miller is said to have shouted, "Let her rip," before voluntarily stepping off the box to his death. The bodies of all 4 men were left hanging for several hours until a photographer arrived to capture the scene. These photographs were later sold as souvenirs to visitors in Ada for years, serving as a grim reminder of the vigilante justice carried out that day.